Hello, my name is Jeremy Barnes, and today I'm going to do a review for Spider-Man No Way Home. I have seen this movie twice now in the movie theaters, the first time in IMAX and the second time on a regular format. And both times I loved the movie, it was great. I definitely had a more visceral reaction the first time, but both times I really enjoyed the movie. So this will be a non-spoiler review for the first part of it, and then the spoilers I'll talk about at the very end of the video. And I'll break this down into different categories. So first of all, I'll just tell you like my overall thoughts about it, which are that, like I said, I really enjoyed it, but it's not my favorite Spider-Man movie. Like a lot of people are hyping it up to be. It's definitely not one of the best Marvel movies in my opinion. But it is very cool and very fan servicey. So I think that's why a lot of people are loving it as much as they are saying. Um, For me, in terms of my ranking of all the Spider-Man movies, this one would actually probably be my fourth favorite, so it is up there. But I still prefer Spider-Man 1 with Tobey Maguire and the Green Goblin. Spider-Man Homecoming is my second one. I really like that one a lot. And then my third one is Into the Spider-Verse, which is amazing. And I think that one's definitely a better Spider-Verse movie than this one is, but this one was also really cool. And obviously, it's totally different seeing animation and like live action, especially because Into the Spider-Verse was its own thing. It didn't have anything else to draw from, but this obviously is drawing from the cinematic history of live action Spider-Man movies. So it's like crazy on that in that sense. And I've also heard that it's like this movie, Spider-Man No Way Home, is like the end game for Spider-Man, which is the case. But whereas Endgame like was a huge movie, this one is not quite as big. It is big, don't get me wrong, but Endgame was huge compared to this. But this one is somehow like less believable watching it than Endgame was. Like Endgame, even though it was a huge movie, you could see that it happening before it happened. Like even way back in I don't know, maybe when Civil War happened or Avengers 2. Like you could kind of see the trajectory of getting to Endgame. And then when you got there, it was awesome, but it was not like you couldn't believe what you were seeing. But watching this movie, I could not believe what I was seeing. Like it's crazy that they got everything that they did and put everything in the movie that a lot of fans, including myself, were expecting to see, and it delivered. So on that front, I was really happy with the movie. So now I'm gonna go into like a little bit more of the specifics. So the story I thought was good. It was not the best Spider-Man story, but it was definitely a good one. And it was pretty much about like learning that you can't save everyone, no matter how hard you try. And after seeing this movie, I feel like the Spider-Man MCU trilogy as a whole is like the Spider-Man origin story instead of just a single movie being the origin. Because obviously, Homecoming, we didn't see his origin, like in terms of getting the spider bite and Uncle Ben's death and all that. Um, but I feel like him becoming the hero that we all know him to be is where he is at the end of this movie, and obviously it started in Civil War, and that arc was a really great arc to see. And I think this is definitely one of the best like superhero trilogies that we've gotten. It might even be better than Toby's because Spider-Man 3 in my opinion is like it might be like literally the bottom of my list, my least favorite Spider-Man movie. But all of the MCU Spider-Man movies have been like pretty damn good in my opinion. So I think I would say that this one is better. Um, and Another thing that Spider-Man learns in this movie is that his responsibility as a superhero must outweigh his own like self-interest, which is something he really struggled with in Far From Home, the second movie. Because in that movie, he didn't want to be Spider-Man at all. He didn't want to have anything to do with that after losing 5 years of his life from Thanos' snap. He just wanted to be a teenager and just live his life and go on a date with MJ, you know, get the girl and have fun with his friends, Ned, and his classmates on vacation. But his superhero life was getting in the way of all that. But in this movie, he learns that, you know, there has to be sacrifices for what he was chosen to do by fate. Like, the spider bit him for a reason. It was not just an accident. Like, it was an accident, but it was fated, as we know, because we've seen these other versions of Spider-Man. And Peter Parker has been Spider-Man so many times throughout the multiverse. So that was all really cool. And this was definitely probably the most personal Spider-Man movie that Tom Holland has gotten as Spider-Man. And it really hit on all levels, in my opinion, emotionally, like in terms of highs and lows. It was all over the place. You felt like there was a lot of scenes that were pretty funny. There was some sad moments. There was some like awesome like action moments. It was dope. So now I'm gonna talk about the characters, which there are a lot in this movie, because obviously they returned all the villains from the other two iterations of Spider-Man. So obviously I'm gonna start first with Peter Parker himself, Spider-Man, Tom Holland, and I would say that he had a great arc in this movie. He was challenged both physically and emotionally, and also kind of mentally, depending on how you look at, or psychologically. Um, he had a lot going on, like a lot of stress in this movie with the way it starts right off the bat. His identity is out as Peter Parker, Spider-Man, so he has that to worry about. Everybody knows where he lives, and he's getting a bunch of hate from Mysterio fans, and they're like trashing his place. If they see him on the street, there's people coming up to him, throwing stuff at him and stuff. And then like, the main concern of the movie that like Peter Parker is going through is that he's trying to get into college because he's in his last year of high school, and he has decided now that he does want to go to college because in Homecoming he was thinking about dropping out of high school, but obviously that didn't happen. Probably after the whole thing with Thanos, he realized like, man, I just gotta live my life. Like, forget about the superhero stuff. Um, and he does want to go to school, and continue school into college. But because of all the stuff going on, it's like hard for him to like get into schools because of the controversy surrounding him. So that's kind of like the main focus for him in the movie. So that was really cool. Um, Obviously, when the multiverse stuff starts happening, it creates more obstacles. Um, but that's all I'm gonna say for now about that. And then as for MJ, um, I will give you one minor spoiler, but they do call her MJ Watson in this movie. So this is the first time that we got confirmation that she is basically like definitely the MCU's version of Mary Jane Watson. And I kind of have like a theory that she is Mary Jane, which before we didn't think she was because her name was Michelle Jones. That's what MJ stands for. But I think maybe she like her birth name was Mary Jane Watson, but she like either lived with her mom or her dad left her or whatever. Well, actually no, because they reference her dad. But maybe something happened with their parents, like they split up or one of them died or something. I don't know. Um, and she might have changed her name because she didn't want to live with her parent that she didn't really have a good relationship with. So she changed it to Michelle Jones, but obviously her last name is still going to be the same, which is Watson. So that was kind of interesting to hear that in the movie. If we see her again, which I hope we do, I hope they give her like the red hair because Zendaya looks good always, but she also looks good with red hair. And MJ does have red hair in the comics and everything that we've seen her in, so that would be cool. But as for her actual character in the movie, I think she had a lot more depth this time from what we've seen in previous movies. Like in the first one, she was just kind of in the background stalking Peter, and very kind of like blunt in terms of like saying stuff. I don't know, like kind of a sarcastic humor type of thing. And she brought that a little bit more in Far From Home. But then by the end of the movie, when she realized Peter was Spider-Man, or when she was confirmed that he was, and they started like kind of working together, she kind of started opening up more, breaking her shell. And we see more of that here. But she does have the same personality traits where she is a little bit more reserved than others, like Ned. But also, I feel like she's very mature compared to Ned. Like Ned is very childish. And speaking of him, I'll talk about him next. I'd say he's still the same old Ned that we all know, and he's a decent character. Like I don't love Ned, but he's okay. And I definitely think his relationship with Peter as friends is the best like friendship that we've seen with Peter Parker in movies so far. So there's still that going for him. Um, but he definitely had some funny moments in this movie. And then Aunt May was another character that they brought back as a more major role this time, because in Far From Home she pretty much didn't do anything, which was very unfortunate because I really liked her in Homecoming. Um, and she definitely had more to do here. I feel like she still didn't get enough to do, mostly because of all like everything else going on with the multiverse shenanigans. But it was nice seeing that Peter gets his strong morals from her, because we had a glimpse of this in the beginning of Far From Home, that she was at a shelter for displaced people from the blip, like coming back. And then here she's working at Feast, which was also in the Spider-Man PS4 video game, which is like a shelter for the homeless and like hungry. And there's a nice moment with her and Peter at Feast, which was really cool, but I'll talk about that later. And then the next character probably that I would mention is Doctor Strange. And Doctor Strange, I like his use in this movie because it's not too much. He's like there kind of in the beginning, shows up in the middle, and then he's at the end. Um, and Doctor Strange was pretty cool in this movie, like, and all of his appearances. And he was decent in his first movie, Doctor Strange, but I didn't really start liking him until Infinity War, and he was dope there, and they definitely continue that in this movie. He's super skilled, man. Like what he could do with the magic is really crazy and cool. Which explains why Wong has been kind of doing everything recently. Like he's definitely been in a lot of places in the MCU. Showed up in Shang-Chi here. He's gonna return in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and both of them also were in What If. So that was kind of interesting to learn. Now I'm gonna talk about the villains. So I'm gonna start off first with Otto Octavius, Daggock, and I would say he had a great closure to his arc in Spider-Man 2, which did have a good closure there, but it ended unfortunately with his death, where he was redeemed at the end. And that was, I think, just from sheer willpower that he overpowered the tentacles who were controlling him in that moment at the end of Spider-Man 2. And here we see both sides of Doc Ock. We see the villainous side controlled by the tentacles, and then we see some of the good side where he's in control. And he's like spot on, like the same exact character from Spider-Man 2. So I thought that was really cool. And going off of that, the same is the case for Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. But I would say that Green Goblin actually had more depth in this movie than he did in Spider-Man 1, and he had a lot of depth in this movie. And there were new elements they added that were really cool that I liked. And he was menacing as hell, man. Like Green Goblin is my favorite Spider-Man movie villain, and probably just in general my favorite Spider-Man villain. Um, and he was menacing in the first movie, like he kicked Spider-Man's ass at the end of Spider-Man 1, Tobey Maguire. Like he brought that same like level of menace to his role in this one. And I don't think it was as brutal in terms of the ass kicking he gave to Peter in this one, Tom Holland, but it was brutal though. That was dope to see. Um, and I got a lot more to say about him later. And then now the next like major villain that was returning was Electro, and I'd say Electro was pretty cool in this movie. He was not my favorite, but I think it was a vast improvement from the way he was in Amazing Spider-Man 2. And I liked Electro in Amazing Spider-Man 2, but only after he became Electro, because before when he was just Max Dillon, I don't know what the hell they were thinking with his characterization there. It was like a little dweeb, some messed up hair, and he was kind of nuts, crazy. Here he doesn't seem like crazy. Well, he didn't seem crazy as Electro in that one, but he was like he gained more confidence in Amazing Spider-Man 2 when he became Electro, and he definitely has that here, but also with some added swagger to it. And I still think I prefer like the blue Electro like design from Amazing Spider-Man 2 over what he has here. But his costume did grow on me from like the trailers. Like I think I do like it more now. But it's still like just kind of decent. Like I feel like they still could have done something a little bit cooler for him in terms of his design. But I think I do like the yellow lightning more than the blue lightning. And it is nice seeing Jamie Foxx's actual face, not covered in like blue makeup and CGI. So that was cool. And then there was the other two villains from the trailers, Sandman and Lizard. And I think both of these characters were completely CG characters because we don't see their human forms until like the end of the movie. And I kind of feel like their CG models that we saw throughout were not done by the actors who originally played them. I feel like there were some voice actors because they did sound like kind of different. I think Sandman sounded closer to Thomas Hayden Church in Spider-Man 3, but it was a little bit off. But Lizard sounded completely different, I think, from how he sounded in The Amazing Spider-Man. Um, and I think at the end, when we saw their human forms, they just used stock footage of the actors from those two movies because it was those two actors that we see when we do see their human forms, but they don't say a single word when they transform into their human selves. So I don't know, they might have paid like a small paycheck to those two actors because they still use their likeness in the movie, but I don't think they actually did anything new for the movie at all. And because of that, I feel like both of these characters were like kind of sidelined. Sandman was underutilized, but he was still used more than the Lizard was. And it was cool seeing a different side to him than we saw in Spider-Man 3 because he continued like where he left off from that movie where he made his peace with Spider-Man and they made their peace with each other. So when he shows up here, he still has that like mentality. Um, but then there's other stuff that happens that kind of makes him a little bit more complex. And just like in Spider-Man 3, Sandman's just kind of always for himself. He doesn't really care about anything else that's going on. He just wants the same thing that he wanted in Spider-Man 3, which is to see his daughter. Um, and Lizard, I feel like, was kind of pointless. Like, he didn't really do anything at all. I feel like he was there just to have another villain, um, which was unfortunate because I would have much rather had Mysterio return. And that's kind of a minor spoiler about what didn't happen in the movie. And that was probably my biggest disappointment with the movie, that there was not six villains to make the Sinister Six. It was literally just the five from the trailer. Um, but you know, it's a small thing though. Like I think I know why they did that. Like it makes sense for the actual plot, and I'll talk about that more in the spoiler section. But I would have preferred to see like Mysterio or another villain return instead of Lizard. Um, but it is what it is, and he did have like some kind of minor action in the movie, but like barely anything though. Happy was in the movie as well, but I feel like I wouldn't really consider him a character. He's more of like a cameo in the movie because he doesn't really do much in this movie. Him and Aunt May split places from this movie and Far From Home because in there Happy had more to do, but here Aunt May does. and then it's the opposite. So he was alright in the scenes that he was in, but he didn't really do anything like important. So now I'm gonna go into the action in the movie, which was awesome, man. Like, it was really good action from beginning to end. I wouldn't say it's the best action that we've seen from MCU Spider-Man. I think Far From Home action might have been better, um, but it was really well done here. So I'm definitely not complaining. Um, there is one like negative that I have to go along with that, and it's just that some sequences were not very well lit, or the camera was like too shaky, so it was just hard to keep track of certain things in some of the action scenes. But if you slow it down, like I think they probably would be pretty cool. Um, and a lot of the action is very fast paced too, so it's just like it just goes like you're like oh shit, and it's easy to get lost in it a little bit. And I'm gonna go like sequence by sequence, from chronological order in the movie. The first major action sequence that we see is the Daggock bridge fight that we saw in the trailers a lot. And Spider-Man wears the Iron Spider suit in that fight, and it was awesome seeing like the 8 arm versus 8 arm fight between Daggock and Spider-Man. And it was cool that like Daggock, he kind of thinks that Spider-Man took the 8 arm idea from him, because when he first like comes out, he thinks Spider-Man's the same Spider-Man from his universe. He doesn't know that he's in a new place, which was really cool, and they showed that in the trailer, so that's why I'm saying that. But this is one of those fights that it was super quick. Like both characters were like they just move really fast. Doc Ock and Spider-Man, which is in line with Spider-Man 2. But the fight is just too short. Like it was dope the whole time, but I could have seen like a few more minutes of the fight between them, and it would have been a little bit cooler. Like the way it works is similar and pretty much the same, but what we actually see is different. And this time, what we see is cool. And the cool thing about it is that in the Doctor Strange movie, I think Doctor Strange is the one that put the characters in the mirror dimension, but he didn't know how to like use it and manipulate it. But here, since he's more seasoned, he is doing that, and that's probably why the sequence is better because he's actually controlling what we see, and it's really dope. And like he flings Spider-Man through the mirror dimension, and he's like trying to get his bearings. And the part in the trailer when he knocks him out of his body into his astral form, that part was really cool, and there's a really cool twist that goes along with that. Um, and that was dope. There's one more scene that is a bit of a spoiler, so I'm not gonna mention it right now in terms of the action. But then at the end we get the final battle, and the final battle was pretty cool. But that's all I'm gonna say about that because that's also very spoilery. So I'll go back to those two later when I go into the spoiler section. The next thing, going off of that Doctor Strange battle, is the visual effects in the movie, and in this one they were top notch, man. It was like beginning to end. The suits looked amazing. Like the CGI was not bad at all. Like it was in Homecoming. I think Far From Home to the previous versions of Spider-Man, which I don't think we had in the MCU yet. He just kind of like verbalized when he was having spider sense. And then in at the end of Far From Home, which was the probably the best scene where he uses spider sense when he gets through Mysterio's illusions. That one kind of had a little bit of a visual moment to it, but I don't think it had any sound effect or no like real like kind of thing from his head like in the comics with the little squiggly lines from here. But here there was a visual and auditory element to it, and it was done really well. And it adds to a bit of the tension when he's kind of trying to figure out what the danger actually is, and that was really cool. So now that's pretty much it for my non-spoiler review. I will say briefly before I go into the spoilers that the music was also really good. Michael Giacchino's score throughout all three movies has been amazing. I really love like the main Spider-Man theme that had the elements of the animated series, like Spider-Man, Spider-Man does whatever Spider-Man. The like epic version of it that Giacchino does is cool, and they do that here. And obviously there's new versions of it. Even some like kind of quieter moments too, and that was all cool. And they also bring back the themes from the Sam Raimi movies, and maybe from at least one of the Amazing Spider-Man movies as well. So that was really cool to hear that. And I didn't notice it the first time I watched the movie, but the second time I definitely did, and it was dope seeing it, man. I'll go specifically into that when I start the spoiler section. So that's what I'm gonna go into right now. So, final warning for spoilers: 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Spoilers. So the movie did most of what I wanted it to do in terms of like all the specific nitty gritty spoiler stuff that I wanted it to have, and it was awesome, man, and a complete joy to watch. I was like smiling wide for like most of the movie. Like it was amazing, a complete thrill ride through and through. One moment that like was really cool that really got me was the actual effects of the spell that went wrong, which we had seen in the trailer, because in the trailer they made it seem like the villains that were affected were villains who died fighting Spider-Man, but that's not actually what it is in the movie. And I like that they threw us off the scent of that in the trailer by like kind of manipulating the dialogue. But what it actually is, and when I figured it out, I was like, I had a light bulb moment, is that the spell affected characters who knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. And it makes sense because all these characters do know. Like Green Goblin knew. Almost everybody in Sam Raimi's movies found out Peter was Spider-Man. Green Goblin knew, Daggock, Sandman, um, Harry, and Venom. Harry and Venom obviously aren't in this movie. Because that would be a bit much with both Norman and Harry from Sam Raimi's movies. And Venom was lame, so nobody wanted him anyway. But yeah, they all knew. And Amazing Spider-Man Lizard knew, so he came back. And Amazing Spider-Man 2, Harry Osborne, Green Goblin knew. But there actually is a plot hole in this movie because Electro actually never found out that Spider-Man was Peter Parker in the movie, because Harry didn't find out until after Electro was defeated. So there was no way that Electro would have known. So that is a plot hole that was in this movie that I noticed. They probably just wanted to bring back Electro, so they're like, just throw him in there. And who knows, maybe he was like kind of still present in that fight when Green Goblin figured it out, and that's how he kind of knew when he came here. But I don't know. Like obviously, that's just me kind of trying to benefit the writers of the movie. But I thought that was really cool, and I kind of have a theory that goes with that for like the Morbius movie based off the trailers for that. Like we see Michael Keaton Vulture in that movie in the trailer. So I feel like everybody who already knew, or the villains at least, who knew Peter Parker was Spider-Man in the MCU, instead of obviously coming here because they're already there, they actually went to a different universe because Vulture knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. So that's why he actually went to the Morbius universe. Um, and Mysterio is the other one that knew, but he died. So he actually is dead because he didn't come back in this movie. So he didn't go anywhere as far as we know. Um, and nobody else so far knows his identity. Another moment that I want to talk about is the death of Aunt May. And man, that moment was sad. I did like how they gave her the with great power there must also come great responsibility line. And that's kind of what I meant in the beginning, where like this is like the end of Spider-Man's origin story. Because instead of Uncle Ben saying it, She's the one that says it, and like it's kind of weird because they don't mention Uncle Ben in this movie. They still don't mention him like in terms of Peter's, Tom Holland's Uncle Ben, and they did mention him in What If. But it's weird. Like at the end when Peter goes to visit her, I was expecting to see his grave right next to his, but it wasn't there. So like I wonder where his grave is or what. And like it's weird that he didn't say anything about him in the movie. So I'm not sure what that's about. He I feel like he is important to Tom Holland's Spider-Man story because in Civil War, Spider-Man's first appearance in the MCU, he does like the way he's talking about why he does what he does to Tony. It does seem like he felt some sort of guilt, and I was assuming for Uncle Ben's death. Because he's like when you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen. The bad things being Uncle Ben dying, they happen because of you. But I don't know. Maybe the relationship wasn't exactly the same in the MCU with Uncle Ben and Peter as we've seen before. But I don't know. I'm really curious about that because we are supposed to get Tom Holland's origin story in an animated Disney Plus series, um, which is part of the MCU. So I guess we'll find out more about Uncle Ben and what happened with all that in that show. But it's really weird that they didn't really mention anything about that at all in this movie. But actually, before I continue talking about the death of Aunt May, let me go back to the other stuff that happens before that. The action sequence that I didn't mention was the Green Goblin apartment fight. And in the movie, after Spider-Man is able to get the little box that was holding the spell from Doctor Strange, he plans to try to save the villains because three out of four, out of five of them were gonna just die if they go back to the universe, and he didn't want to just let that happen to them. He wanted to try to help in any way he could. Um, so he tries to make like cures for them, to fix their mistakes, which I don't even know if that makes sense. Like I feel like even if they go back, they're still gonna die unless they go back at a different time and they don't ever fight Spider-Man to die. So I'm not sure exactly how that logic works, but Peter starts with like working with Norman Osborn because he leaves the Goblin suit and glider behind because he when he comes out, he first comes out as Green Goblin and he's gonna approach Spider-Man and Daggock and like attack, and then that's the Goblin. But then later on, he's Norman, and Norman's like he doesn't want what's happening with the Green Goblin. Like he's like a schizophrenic or dual personality, like victim or patient, and he just wants to be healthy, like in terms of his mind. So he goes to feast, and that's when Aunt May like tells Peter like this is what we do here. We help who needs to be helped, and this guy needs help because Peter was just gonna send him back, and that's when he starts to work with him, and Peter and Norman work together to make a new inhibitor chip for Doc Ock because that's why he was in his villain form, and they do that successfully. So that's when we see the good side of Otto Octavius, and he does come back, and he wants to help Peter and Norman because obviously it's got to be one of them, and he's trying to figure out like who is setting it off, and he figures it out, and he webs Green Goblin, and then like he switches, and the Goblin comes out, and he talks to Spider-Man. The way that he monologues was fucking fire, man. And he's scary, man. Like one of the foes, like grin is creepy, man. And that was the cool thing about taking his mask off of the movie. Like I like his mask from the Sam Raimi movies, but it is cool seeing one of the Dafoe's actual expressions. I think it does add more to the role because even just his voice was really powerful in the Sam Raimi movie, but seeing his expressions does add a lot. So that was really cool. And that's when he says the really good line from the trailer, like, Peter, you're struggling to have everything you want while the world is trying to make you choose. And that's kind of what this whole movie's about. It's about Peter having to choose between Spider-Man and Peter Parker. His responsibilities as Spider-Man and what he wants as Peter Parker. And that was like a really cool kind of like climax moment of the movie when we see that, because it drove that point home. and and that shit was fucking dope because he's getting in the mind of like the other villains, like Electro. He actually likes being here because the technology in the MCU is more advanced than it was in Amazing Spider-Man 2, which I feel like was already pretty advanced compared to like Sam Raimi Spider-Man universe, but it is probably more advanced here. And when he senses Tony Stark's arc reactor technology, he wants some of that energy. He wants some of that power. So he doesn't want to go home for those two reasons. One, he's gonna die if he goes. Two, he has more power here, so he wants to stay here. And Norman gets in his mind, so he makes him switch on them too. And Electro shocks or blasts Daggock out of the building, and like he starts to leave too. Um, and Lizard this whole time was just sitting in the van, which is why I said like he wasn't doing shit in the movie. Um, and Sandman's just like, yo, this is not my problem, so he just also leaves. And then Green Goblin is fighting Spider-Man, and that fight was fucking brutal. They were going through fucking walls and ceilings and floors. And then at the end, like Aunt May was there helping Peter out too, because she's the one also that wanted to help. Since that is like her job, she volunteers at Feast. And when Norman went as Norman, he went to her and he saw her first. But when obviously Goblin comes out, Peter tells her to run, but she still wants to like help. But at the end, when they get to the ground floor, she tries to prick him with the cure for the Goblin, but it didn't work. I think probably because Norman sabotaged that cure, because obviously the Goblin didn't want Norman to be normal. Uh, and this whole time it was a long con that he was playing. He was playing Norman Osborn and playing the victim, but he was really just getting a lay of the land and seeing like what is what and what's going on and figuring everything out. And that's how he found his weakness. That Spider-Man's weakness is his morality. And he fucking hit Aunt May with his glider. And I'm fucking lucky that the blade was not out, but still that blunt force hit her. And I'm surprised she didn't die right away. And at first it seemed like she was gonna be okay. And the Goblin left, and Peter was there to like make sure she was okay. And they were talking for a bit, but then she like gets weak and she falls down. And as soon as she fell, I was like, damn, she's dead. Um, and it was weird because I feel like Peter's reaction to her death wasn't like as visceral or strong or emotionally resonant as like other deaths have been. But I think it's because at this point in this version of Spider-Man's life, he's fucking lost so much and he's kind of grown numb to it. So he just sits there with her and just talks with her. And it is a little bit heartbreaking because he's like, don't go to sleep, wake up. And it's just me and you here. And just like with what he did with Tony, he tells her that he's sorry. He blames himself for her death. And it's not his fault. It was her fault. She chose to be there and she chose to help out. So that shit was kind of heartbreaking. But I did not cry on that scene. But from that moment, like my tears were building up in my mind, like starting from my chest and getting all the way up to my eyes. Um, and they finally fall out when we see the return of the two legends, Toby and Andrew. They come back, and that shit was dope. But they come back, and it's a little bit of some lighter moments before we see them meet Peter, Tom Holland. But when they do, they're trying to get him, to come back from that depression that he's in after Aunt May's death, and he's just sitting there, just depressed, crying, trying to process everything. And J. Jonah Jameson is fucked up for that video because he knows that Aunt May is Peter Parker's aunt, Spider-Man's aunt, and he still fucking makes a fucking news report blaming him for her death too. Like that shit was fucked up, man. Like the J. Jonah Jameson from the Raimi universe, I think has more heart than this universe's J. Jonah Jameson. He was not as fucking like erratic as the one from Raimi universe, but he had less of a heart, I think. Um, and they figure out where he is because Ned and MJ, they were waiting for him after everything that happened. Like they couldn't reach him; he wasn't answering his phone. But they figure it out because Toby asks MJ if he has anywhere where he likes to go to be alone, and it was the roof of the school, of the high school. And we know that too because in the early part when Spider-Man's identity is first revealed, that's where him and MJ go when everybody's like has their fucking cameras out on him at school. So that's where they find him. And the other two Peters, Toby and Andrew, they try to like relate to him on that personal level of what they lost. And at first, like Tom's like he doesn't want to hear that shit because nobody knows what he's going through, which in a way is true, but also they do know. If anybody knows, they know. And Toby mentions Uncle Ben, we do hear that reference. And obviously, Andrew also lost Uncle Ben, but he also mentions Gwen. That Gwen is his MJ, and like Peter starts to listen and like kind of come around. But in that moment when they were all grieving together or talking about everything they lost, that's when the tears came down my eyes. And Tom says, I think that what Ame tells him, like with great power, and then Toby's like, oh shit, I recognize that, and he finishes the line like, it must also come great responsibility. And that's why the two Spider-Men went there because they sensed that there was something wrong with this version of Peter Parker and that they needed him, and they did, and he did need them. I mean, um, and that was their responsibility in this moment to help him and show him the way. He had a lot of like darkness in his heart after what the Green Goblin did. He had vengeance in his heart, and you see that even before Aunt May dies, like he's fucking pummeling Green Goblin, and Green Goblin's just fucking laughing because he wants that shit to happen. And when in that scene, like I definitely got vibes and like I thought about the Joker and the Dark Knight. But honestly, I think this was fucking even better because the Joker is just fucking crazy. So he just wants to see Batman like. Well, I guess it is kind of the same, but he wanted to see Batman just fucking beat the shit out of him, and he wanted to turn him into like a villain or into somebody that the people would go against. And Green Goblin was doing something similar in here, but he didn't. It was not really so much about the people because the people already were hating on Spider-Man because of the Mysterio controversy. But he wanted to fucking break Spider-Man here, and he came really fucking close, man. And then after Tom Holland finally comes around, they start planning like what they're gonna do. And I really like that they paired them up not just as Spider-Man but also as the Peter Parker science room. And we never even saw Toby really do that type of stuff in his movies, so that was really cool seeing him do that now. And all their conversation in that whole sequence was really fun to hear. Like we hear Toby reference Harry because Ned asked him like if he had a best friend too, and that was funny. I didn't even like notice the first time, but there's a little bit of like physical comedy in that sequence because when he goes to Tom, he's like kind of keeping his distance because he hears that like Harry died in Toby's arms after like fighting him. So he's like, oh shit, I don't want that to happen to me. So he's just kind of being careful. That was kind of funny. And we also see the whole scene when Toby and Andrew first meet, when Ned summons them through the portal. That shit was cool too, because it was like the Spider-Verse moment with Peter B. Parker and Miles, where they kind of sense each other and they both like shoot their webs at each other. Um, and that moment was like really funny. I think it kind of lasted a little bit too long. That whole scene when they both come through the portal in Ned's Nana's house, but it was still good. Um, and we see some more of that type of interaction when they're doing the thing in the lab. And Andrew plans to get the cure for Lizard because he already did it in the Amazing Spider-Man. And then I think Peter said he was working on the one for Norman. So I think Tom was doing it for Sandman and Electro. Um, and obviously Daggock was already cured in the apartment sequence. Um, and Toby also talks to Andrew in that scene and also mentions his MJ that is different from Tom's MJ. And we had already heard about Gwen from Toby that he failed to save her. And actually, that moment when they were all talking about their lost ones, Andrew also says that at some point in his Spider-Man career, he stopped pulling his punches. So I like when he said that, I was like, was he killing people? I was like, damn, what the hell? I did not see that coming as like a possibility for this movie on what happened with the two versions of Spider-Man. But Andrew's Spider-Man universe has definitely been the darkest, so I guess I could see that happening. But I don't know if that's exactly what he meant, because he didn't seem like a darker version of Spider-Man. He still seemed very light, but maybe that was just feeding off of the positive energy of Tom Holland, Peter, and his friends. I'm not sure. Is like I want to see some more Andrew movies or anything with him. So we'll see what happens with all that. But then we get to the final battle when they all suit up as Spider-Man, and we see some more kind of just hanging out, and they discuss their web shooters, which is another thing that I wanted to see in the movie, and how Toby has the organic web shooters, and that was cool that they talked about that, and they also talk about like their villains and like some similarities and differences. Like Toby says he fought Venom, a squid monster from space. And Tom's like, oh, I fought an alien. He was not a goo. He was actually purple, Thanos. And and it was funny how Toby's like, it's crazy that you fought him in space because for him it was the opposite. He came to Earth and he fought him there. And then Andrew's like, what? I want to fight an alien. I didn't fight an alien. And Venom actually exists in Andrew's universe now that I think about it. Um, but I don't think he's an alien. I think he's a lab created version of Venom because it's based off of the Ultimate Comics, and that's how Venom was created in the Ultimate Comics. But we see like a little black ball of goo in the like little chamber in Oscorp in Amazing Spider-Man 2, where we see all the other Sinister Six tech. So that is a possibility for Andrew's like next movie if they do one for him, which I would like to see. Um, and I like the like callback to Spider-Man 2 when Toby's like stretching and he's like his back. And even the way he says it when he's like my back, I immediately fucking thought of that scene in Spider-Man 2 when he's trying to test his powers at when he's trying to get his powers back and test it out and he fucking falls on the car. He's like, oh my back, and then he like tries to stand up, oh my back. That shit was hilarious. Um, and I didn't even notice the first time watching it, but I watched it with one of my coworkers the first time in IMAX, and he noticed that they did the Spider-Man pointing meme with the three Spider-Man, and they actually did it twice in the movie. They did it when it was the three Peter Parkers when Ned calls Peter, and they all like look up, and they're like, "Which one are you talking about?" And then they do it when they're suited up as Spider-Man as well. Um, I think it's when Tom is telling them like, "Yo, Peter one, Peter two," and they don't know which one's which. They're like, "Is that you? Is that you? Who are we talking about?" Because they all got the same name, so they're trying to figure out how to like talk to each other specifically which one. Too bad they can't break the fourth wall like how we can. And this one's Toby, that one's Andrew. You're Tom. But it was kind of funny. I think Tom was Spider-Man one or Peter one, which is because this is his universe, and then I think Toby was Peter two because he's the OG, and Andrew was Peter three. Um, but I'm not 100% sure about that. And then I also love like at the end of the fight when they cure Electro, how he references like, "Damn, I thought you were black" to Andrew, and he's like, there's got to be a black Spider-Man out there somewhere." So that was obviously a reference to Miles Morales, who I cannot wait to see his live action adaptation. But that was cool. It would have been cool seeing him. I was not expecting that, and it makes sense that they didn't put that because he deserves his own movie for his introduction into a live action. But that was cool. We still got a nod to him in the movie. And as for like the final spell in the movie, it's crazy. Like it changes everything. Um, what I believe that it did is that it erased the entire world's memory of Peter Parker. So Peter Parker basically doesn't exist. Nobody knows who he is. People know Spider-Man still, and I feel like all of Spider-Man's journeys in the MCU are still like canon to the MCU. It's just that nobody can connect him with Peter anymore. They know him as Spider-Man. Um, so that's like kind of interesting, and it opens the doors for like kind of them to do anything they want going forward. But it's crazy because obviously I want to see more of MJ and maybe Ned. So I don't know how that's gonna like work now. If he is gonna tell them eventually, like he was going to tell MJ at the end of this movie, but he chooses not to. Probably just because he doesn't want to complicate her life and things are going well for her and Ned seemingly with MIT and all that. Um, but the very end when he suits up as Spider-Man, I fucking love that suit. Like I wish they gave us a really clear like still shot of it, but it looks amazing. It has a brighter blue, kind of like this, but it's really sleek though. And it looks like he took some inspiration from Toby and Andrew's suits because he has like a bigger spider logo. It's not huge like any of Toby and Andrew's, but it is a similar like style to Toby's Spider-Man logo on his chest. And I feel like the back logo with the red is more similar to Andrew's back spider, but it still has the MCU like eyes, which are perfect, and it's like a classic looking costume. So that just might be the best MCU and actually best any Spider so far. So whenever we see Spider-Man again, I can't wait to see more of that suit, or if they make a toy of it or something. Um,
Hey, so I just realized that I forgot to talk about Toby and Andrew as characters when I went to my spoilers section. So, Andrew comes in first when Ned's trying to open up those portals to find Peter, Spider-Man, Tom. But Andrew comes through. He takes his mask off when we see the reveal, and that shit was dope. And I feel like Andrew, you could tell that he was so fucking delighted to be back in the costume as Spider-Man, and he's just having a blast being there with the other two and just, doing Spider-Man stuff. and I feel like definitely went back into it seamlessly. But Toby, when Ned does the thing again, and he walks through as Peter Parker, he's not wearing his costume. Um, the first time I watched it, there was like something off about it for me, and I think it might just be because he's old and he like visually like visibly looks older, and it's just weird seeing because we haven't seen him like that as Peter Parker. Um, so it might have just been that, but I do think he also might have been a little rusty. Like I don't think he played it exactly the same way that he played it before, and maybe that's intentional because he is supposed to be an older, like more seasoned Spider-Man, so he has changed, but I'm not sure. And I found more of a problem with it the first time I watched it. The second time I really liked it a lot. I didn't have any problem with the way he did it. It was just a little bit weird the first time. But it was fucking amazing seeing all three of them together. They had some great chemistry, all three of them. And I think especially Toby and Andrew had a very good bond. I think that they developed. Tom was still kind of on his own because he was like it's his movie and he was in the thick of it all. But these two, like, they came in and they had more similar experiences since they didn't have like the Avengers like Tom did, and they both lost Uncle Ben and heard that line from him. Um, so yeah, but I just wanted to say something about that because I think I forgot it in the other part of my video. But anyway, back to it.
So now I'm gonna talk about that music. On the bridge scene in the beginning, we hear Green Goblin's theme when he comes out. I don't know if we hear Daggock's theme. I, we might, but I don't know. I feel like his theme for me isn't as like recognizable, so it could have been there, but I just missed it. And then when Electro comes out, when Tom is looking for Green Goblin, he finds Electro instead in the electric towers or whatever they're called, the Transformers, I think they're called. Um, and when he like wakes up, because he's like kind of reforming from the other universe, and he wakes up, we hear a little cue from the Electro theme from Amazing Spider-Man 2, and that was dope. And we hear Toby's Spider-Man theme when he cures Sandman and he sees his human form, and then also when Toby reunites with Daggock, we hear it again. And I'm not sure if we hear any music from Amazing Spider-Man besides Electro, like if we hear a Spider-Man theme. But I think in the credits I did see that there was something, I think from Amazing Spider-Man 1, but I don't know where it happened in the movie. And his theme is not as like iconic as Toby's. The better one is probably the one from Amazing Spider-Man 2, like the with the trumpets when he's doing the little swing at the beginning of that movie. But I don't think we heard that in the movie. Um, so now briefly, I'm gonna talk about the fan service type stuff that they did in this movie. Besides obviously bringing Toby and Andrew and all the villains back, we also saw a cameo from Matt Murdock, played by Charlie Cox from the Netflix Daredevil series, and that was pretty cool to see. I had already seen a leak about it and heard about it a long time ago, so it's not really a surprise for me. But it was still cool seeing him, and like now he's in the MCU, like for sure. And Kevin Feige already said that he will be in the MCU coming back for more to do, and I think he's gonna be in She-Hulk next because She-Hulk is a lawyer just like he is, so they might have like a case going against each other or maybe working together. I'm not sure. Um, but even though it was cool seeing Matt Murdock in this movie, I feel like that was kind of a negative for me because he didn't really serve any real purpose in the movie. So it was just kind of like thrown in there. Like I thought we would have gotten a courtroom scene where he's actually like representing Peter and like that helps him clear his name, but instead it's magic that clears his name, and we don't ever see that. So I feel like he might have done something like behind the scenes that we didn't see, and he says something like the charges, like they're not gonna do, like nothing's gonna happen with the charges against him. So he did do something, I think, for him, but we don't really see none of that. But it was cool seeing like the little daredevil reflex that he has when somebody throws a brick, a Mysterio supporter throws a brick through the window, and Matt catches it. When it first happened, I thought Spider-Man caught it. I thought Peter caught it, but it was Spider-Man, and he's like, "Yo, how did you do that?" So I hope this is a tease that Spider-Man and Daredevil are gonna team up sometime in the future because they're a great duo, and I love both of those characters. Probably some of my favorite Marvel characters from before, like the MCU. And Daredevil, the show, is literally the best Marvel property or creation that they've done. I mean, I don't read the comics, so I don't know if it's safe to say it's better than any comic book, but it's definitely better than any movie and any other TV show. And it's dope to see him back. And quick spoiler for Hawkeye, we also got Kingpin back, so that's gonna be fucking dope, man. Like they might they might collide at some point in the future once again. So I'm looking forward to that, and obviously seeing Kingpin in the Hawkeye finale this Wednesday. So that's gonna be dope. And the other thing that was in this movie was a cameo from Eddie Brock, which at the end of Venom 2 we saw him teleport into the MCU, and we saw that he saw the broadcast of Spider-Man's identity as Peter Parker, but he was not in the movie at all. And then he just fucking leaves in that post-credit scene when Strange does the spell. So he didn't really serve any purpose other than to leave a piece of the symbiote in the MCU. Which, when I first saw it, when he left, and there's something on the counter still in the little bar that he was in. I didn't know what it was at first because it was still, but then somebody said, "Oh, it's Venom," and then it moved. So I was like, "Oh shit." So that's kind of cool. Like I feel kind of neutral about this cameo because it served a tiny purpose compared to the Matt Murdock thing, which in my opinion didn't really serve any purpose. So I don't know. They could go in a million different places or ways in Spider-Man's next MCU appearance. Like they could do Venom right away since there is a symbiote in the MCU now. But they could also just do Spider-Man with the black suit before Venom, the character, and it might be a different villain like Scorpion. We have still haven't seen him. He was teased in Homecoming, and I've been waiting for him because I feel like he would be badass. Now they got Matt Murdock here and Kingpin in the MCU, so Kingpin could be a villain. Maybe it could be a combination of these things. Like I don't know. I feel like they wouldn't want to do too much in Spider-Man 4. But I feel like one thing they could do is have like Kingpin financially back some sort of science project to create the Scorpion armor or suit, and he gives it to Matt Gargan to fight Spider-Man. And along with that is the symbiote suit, and Spider-Man uses that to fight both of them, or at least just Scorpion. And he gets like a darker, part of himself through that. But the only thing about that is there's like not really anybody that Spider-Man loves anymore. So I don't know how much of darkness would actually come out unless he has a new love interest who was then killed or threatened in the next movie. But if they do a new love interest, it would be cool seeing Black Cat. Like I kind of feel like they're saving Black Cat for the Amazing Spider-Man universe because she was originally supposed to appear there, and they reference both her and Rhino in the Morbius trailer. So she might show up in something like that instead. But who knows? They could probably show up at anywhere at this point. Like Sony, I think they kind of do have a plan now. Um, but I guess we just have to wait and see what they're gonna do. Um, it was cool actually. Now that I think about it, when the multiverse was cracking open at the end, we did see like a silhouette of Rhino there, And I noticed that the first time I watched it, but the second time I noticed something new, and we also saw some guy with a spear. So that had to have been Kraven the Hunter, who Tom Holland said was originally going to be the main villain for No Way Home until they decided they were going to do the multiverse thing. And John Watts, the director, also wanted to do Kraven, and I would have liked to have seen that as well. Like I always thought No Way Home was gonna be like a Sinister Six type movie, but originally before I found out it was gonna be the multiverse thing, I thought it was gonna be kind of like since Spider-Man's identity is out, like J. Jonah Jameson was gonna hire like Mac Gargan to hunt him down, and I thought Kraven would also be one of those people hunting him down for the greater good. And then like the other villains would come in as well. Like it would be Scorpion, Kraven, Vulture would come back. Uh, Mysterio, I thought he was gonna be alive, but he's not. Um, they could have had Shocker come back and somebody else. Um, but obviously they didn't do that. But I think that would have been a cool movie too. I'm happy with the one we got, and honestly, this might have been a better movie than the one we would have got otherwise. So I'm not complaining, definitely. But we are supposed to get a Kraven the Hunter movie in the same vein as Venom and Morbius, and Aaron Taylor Johnson has already been cast as him. So this might have just been a nod to that, or like a tease of what's coming on that front, on that side of things with Sony. Um, and I mentioned earlier that like there was a plot hole with Electro not knowing Spider-Man's identity. And the reason why Eddie Brock coming into the MCU from the spell is not a plot hole is because I think Venom is the one that knew Spider-Man's identity beforehand. Eddie Brock did not. And the reason for that is because at the end of Venom 2, in that post-credit scene, Venom is gonna tell Eddie that about the multiverse, that he knows like the symbiotes have like a shared knowledge across universes. So I feel like every version of Venom throughout the multiverse are like connected, or they know the same things. So because Spider-Man Sam Raimi had a Venom and he knew Spider-Man was Peter Parker, this Venom also knew, and that's why they came through. Um, I just wanted to say that. That's not really important in any way, but it was just something that I thought about. Um, the only other thing that I want to like kind of break down or go into is like some of the things that I wanted to see or was expecting to happen that did happen. So the main one was seeing Toby and Andrew, which we got. Um, I wanted to see some like epic web slinging through the city. We didn't really get a lot of that, but we did get a little bit of it. And mainly like kind of the thing at the end. It was like not a lot, but a really quick, kind of cool camera work with him swinging through in that new costume, and that was cool. We saw Norman and Otto meet for the first time. They never met in the Sam Raimi movies. So that was cool seeing that and like kind of working together a little bit. We saw Green Goblin beat the shit out of Spider-Man. One thing we didn't see that I wish we would have seen is a scene between Norman and Toby Spider-Man, because Green Goblin is his best villain as well as now Tom's. But they didn't fucking talk at all. We did see Toby save his life, which was actually kind of poetic, because Tom was gonna fucking stab him with his glider, just like how he died in Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man movie. But Toby was not gonna let that happen again, so it's poetic in that sense that he saved him from the same fate he had previously. Um, but we did hear Norman mention Harry as well when they were at the shelter, the feast shelter, and that was kind of cool. We didn't hear Toby talk about Kurt Connors being the Lizard, which is something I was kind of like hoping to see, or wanted to see, kind of expected to see, because Lizard was here obviously, and Lizard is Kurt Connors, and we saw a Kurt Connors in Spider-Man's Sam Raimi movies, but that never happened, unfortunately. Like I said, Lizard got the short end of the stick in this movie. We did see MCU Spider-Man meet that version of J. Jonah Jameson. They didn't meet in person, but they had that little phone call, so that was kind of cool. I hope we see more of JJ in the future. Um, we heard Andrew talk about Gwen. Toby mentioned Mary Jane, and he said they made it work. So they might be married. Who knows? They might have a kid. That would be kind of cool. Man, Toby looked old in this movie, didn't he? When I first saw it, I felt like something was off, but I think it was just of how old he looked. It like threw me off a little bit, but I think he did a good job portraying the character again. But I definitely think Andrew did a better job than Toby. And if I was to rank the three Spider-Man in live action, Tom's my favorite. Then it would be Andrew and then Toby. But it was cool seeing everybody. I really wish Venom was like in the actual movie, like as a sixth member. It would have been probably a little bit too much to do, because he has his whole backstory too. So I understand why they didn't do it, but it would have been cool, man. Like I guess they're saving it for another time. But since Eddie left the MCU and the Venom symbiote stayed, I kind of feel like those two versions of those characters are not going to fight each other. There's going to be either a different version of Venom or a different character entirely. Like in the comics, there's also a Venom piece of Venom symbiote that attaches to Flash Thompson, and he becomes Agent Venom. So that might be the case on what they do in the MCU. I wouldn't want to see that because this version of Flash is lame, but you never know what they could do with him. Like they could buff him up and update his character more. But I don't know. I'm definitely curious to see what they're gonna do with it. I was like hoping for a post-credit scene that we would get the finale like fight between Andrew and Rhino that we saw the beginning of at the end of Amazing Spider-Man 2. That didn't happen. We didn't get anything except for that Venom thing. But then it was cool seeing the trailer for Multiverse of Madness at the end. And and honestly, it didn't hype me up as much as I thought it would have. But I am excited for the movie. And when they release the first trailer, it's gonna be different from what we saw here. So I'm just waiting for that now. But it might still be like a bit away. We might get it like I don't know, Christmas time, because the movie got delayed until May now. But they should be coming out with the first trailer soon though. And then like 2 or 3 months later, they'll do another trailer before the movie actually comes out. But I think that's pretty much it for my Spider-Man No Way Home review. I really liked the movie. It was dope seeing the three Spider-Man together. And that's the part of the movie where I told you, like, I couldn't believe I was actually seeing all three of them together. And, like, when they first, like, are all running to go out, and they fucking do that little web thing where they, like, throw each other with their webs, that shit was fucking dope. And then when they, like, all jump onto the Statue of Liberty and land there, that was cool, too. And people thought that scene was gonna have all three of them, like they were breaking it down, like how they were edited out. I didn't think that part was edited out. The only part that I thought was the like wide shot with the three villains on the right and then Spider-Man in the middle on the left, because that one was obvious that there was one Spider-Man on the bottom and one more on the top. And as most people predicted, Andrew did kick the lizard on the bottom, and then I didn't really see what Toby did. I think he was just swinging up. Uh, but I think Toby actually went to Sandman, and Tom went to Electro, I think, in the beginning. But it was really cool seeing all the matches between the movie too, like the matchups, the fights and stuff. Like at the end when Daggock came back, and he like made it seem like he was gonna fight the Spider-Man, like he went back to his dark side again. But then he was just tricking Electro, and he put the cure in him. That part was really cool. Toby fought Sandman. the Lizard and Electro in this movie. Andrew, I think, just fought Electro and Lizard, his two villains. Um, and Tom fought everybody because it is his movie. It was cool when Sandman first came back, how he was saving Spider-Man from Electro because of that thing that I told you about, how he made his peace with Spider-Man at the end of Spider-Man 3. So I liked how they kept that part of his character in there. I kind of didn't really like what they did with Sandman though, because he was like flip flopping throughout the movie. I think he just got frustrated at the end that nothing was happening. Like he wanted to go home and shit was taking forever. So I think that's why he kind of turned back on Spider-Man. But I don't think he was actually with the villains. He was just kind of doing it for himself. Um, but he did, I think, turn on Electro because Electro wanted to stay, and it would have sabotaged his chance to go home. So they kind of had a bit of a like a little bit of a rivalry. That scene in the apartment was really funny when they talked about how they each like got their powers. How Sandman fell into a particle accelerator, and Electro fell into a vat of eels. And Jamie Foxx is like, "You gotta be careful where you fall, man." And the delivery of that line was fucking funny as hell. That was a good moment. Also, you could just tell how much Andrew fucking loves being Spider-Man. He was having such a good time in this movie, and you could tell. I like how he's like, "I love you guys," when he was talking about Toby and Tom. He's like, "I always wanted brothers." All that stuff was really fun to see. Um, it was also cool seeing the two different Spider-Men reunite with their villains, like Toby with Daggock and then Andrew with both Lizard and Electro. The Electro thing was more prevalent than Lizard. Once again, Lizard short end of the stick, but they did have one tiny moment together though. Um, Electro and Lizard also met when they were all in the crypt together for the first time, and it was really cool how they were like all figuring out what happened to them, like in their future. How like Doc Ock knew that Norman died, and then Sandman's like, both of you guys died, and Lizard was like, oh shit, did I die? And he asked like Max, Electro, and obviously he didn't. Sandman and Lizard both did not die in their universes from what we saw, but Electro, I wasn't sure if he died, but he I think he did die. Amazing Spider-Man 2. Um, but that whole sequence was really cool, and the way they built up that tension with everybody figuring that out, and then Doctor Strange comes to like put them back, and that's what starts the whole Spider-Man Doctor Strange chase. That was really well done. That was a fucking cool scene. Another moment that was really good was when MJ falls off the scaffolding. Um, I think it happens when the fucking bomb goes off when Green Goblin comes and blows up the little magic box, and like Tom jumps to catch her, and he's about to get her, but then the Goblin's glider fucking hits him, because Green Goblin's an evil motherfucker, and then like immediately it fucking kicks in for Andrew, and he jumps and he gets her right away, like he does not let her fall, and at the end when they land, like he starts to break down because the PTSD hits him. That shit was also a great moment, and that was like kind of beautiful because I feel like he forgave himself in that moment for failing to save Gwen. It was like he was redeemed. Um, so that was really cool. And people predicted that he would catch her. I thought Tom was gonna catch her, but I do like what they did. Like it was cool the way they did it, because Tom would have catched her, but the glider hit him. Um, and then I think in that same moment there might have been like some of the villains that were already cured. They also fell down, and I think Toby saved them, but they don't really show it that much. Like they show that he's about to save somebody, but we don't really see. I don't think who it was, or at least I didn't. And then we also get the hug at the end when they're doing the reverse spell, and all the Spider-Men say bye to each other, and Tom also says bye to Ned and MJ. That was kind of heartbreaking. And then at the end, when he like goes to return to them, and he doesn't say anything, that was kind of crazy. And then happy when at Aunt May's gravestone, they kind of like meet for the first time again. Another moment that was really cool was the Daggock scene on the bridge, the fight scene, when he's like, I should have. Daggock says, I should have killed your little girlfriend when I had the chance. And like Tom was inside of like, I don't know if it was if he was in a car or if it was one of those cylinders, but then the fucking spider legs come out, and he comes out and he's like, he like clenches his fist. He's like, what did you say? And he gets real serious. That part was fucking dope. The way he came out like that, that was a good moment. Um, and it was cool the way that the nanotech worked. Like that guy tried to absorb it for the technology, but since it's part of Spider-Man's heads-up display, he controls it, and that's how he was able to defeat him. But I feel like it was kind of too easy. That's why I said earlier that it was like it was too quick the fight, but it was still cool while it lasted though. I also liked all the callbacks in the movie. Like Norman says the exact same line when Spider-Man's like that he could probably figure out a way to cure them, and he's like, I'm something of a scientist myself, and that's like one of the most memed lines from Spider-Man One. So that was kind of funny seeing that, hear him say that again. Um, and Daggock says twice in this movie, "The power of the sun in the palm of my hand," and Toby repeats that at the end the second time when they reunite. So that was a cool callback. MJ working at that diner, I feel like was an Easter egg nod to Mary Jane and Spider-Man One when she worked at the Moon Dance diner. Because even the outfit kind of looks similar. I think it might have been a different color. Because I think she wore pink in Spider-Man One, and here she wore blue. But I feel like that was a thing there, and it makes me think like I don't know if Mary Jane ever worked at a diner in the comics or any other adaptation, but who knows? There's also a little bit of a nod with the lizard when he hears Ned and MJ talking because he's still trying to close the little portal that he opened, but he can't do it. And Lizard goes up there because he's like, "Yo, I hear them," and he's gonna go attack them. And Spider-Man goes back to obviously save them and get him off of their trail. I think that was kind of a bit of a nod to when Spider-Man, Andrew, and Lizard were fighting in his high school in Amazing Spider-Man 1. So that was kind of cool. Lizard likes destroying high schools. Um, and then there was also a couple of nods to the Spider-Man PS4 game. Obviously, the Aunt May working at Feast was one of them. And Tom Holland said that he did like one of the Spider-Man moves from the game, and I think he actually did two. It was the first one when he was fighting Green Goblin in the apartment scene. He does the move where he's fighting Kingpin in the beginning of the game, where he like webs, like he jumps up and webs the ground and then kicks him through the ground. Um, and then at the end of the movie, when he gets his rematch with Green Goblin, he does a move where he like flips over him, webs him, and then throws him down again. I think both of those were from the game. And then in that scene when he visits Aunt May's grave, her tombstone reads, "Save someone, you save everyone," and that was a direct quote from the Spider-Man PS4 game. So that was kind of cool. This Aunt May didn't hit as well as much as the one from the PS4 game, which is kind of crazy. They've been killing Aunt May a lot recently. Now that I think about it, because she died in that game too. But they're both good though. Tom Holland lost a lot, but I don't think he lost as much as Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man did. But I think that's pretty much all I have to say now. So thank you for watching my video. I'll catch you next time. Peace.